So the new pool party update came out a while ago, and that meant new furniture, pools, and of course a new contest. In this year's summer contest, I attempted to build a Bali-inspired mansion and tried to make it as big and realistic as possible until my computer breaks. No, seriously. Last year my summer project failed, and one problem I had was extensive lagging the bigger the project got. And since I'm using the same computer, I was expecting kind of the same problems. Okay, so this year's contest was a shell contest, which basically means you get a pre-made pool layout and then you had to turn it into something cool. You could build around it, add on top, whatever, but the shell itself wasn't allowed to be changed. The decorative stuff, like the slides for example, could be removed though. And since I already knew I'm not really a water park person, but wanted to do something more calm and relaxing, you know, like a pond or a koi pond, those slides had to go. Okay, bye. One thing you were allowed to change was the environment. Now, Pinnacle Beach is okay, don't get me wrong, but the nearby buildings kind of limit what styles you can really do there. So I decided to move the whole project onto the island instead. One thing I needed to make sure was that the pool could actually look like a pond, like slightly greenish and not have this bright swimming pool blue. I tried out different floors and also lamps with RGB lighting, but the light never really reached the surface, so in the end natural stone tiles in green worked best. The initial map size is 40 by 40 meters, so I decided to make the building 40 meters long as well. As it turns out, you can actually change the map size through edit borders. How did I not know that?
Bruh.
I have over 700 hours in a game, and I only recently learned that in a YouTube video. By the point I learned that, I was already way too far into the project, and honestly 40 meters is pretty huge anyway. When I started construction, I didn't really have an exact plan yet what I wanted to do. I threw a few walls and arches around the pond, and when I ran out of ideas where to build the next wall, I started experimenting with placing furniture and then built walls around that. And in that case it worked for me because even though I didn't have an exact plan, I already had kind of a rough idea where I wanted things to go. And for the ground floor, I already knew I wanted an entrance hall and shared living spaces. Something like a formal living room, a kitchen, a dining room, a spa, and something like a wine cellar. Because for me, being rich and wine just goes together somehow. And yeah, so this is what I laid out. Then I added a staircase, created another floor, and then it was basically just rinse and repeat. The first floor was mainly for bedrooms. I wanted a large master suite with an almost absurd amount of space, maybe a smaller suite, maybe 1 or 2 regular rooms, and then some staff quarters. Adding the roof should have been the end of laying out a floor plan, but then the building needed another entertainment area, which was a little less formal than what I had so far. You know, where you could really hang out, get drunk, watch a movie, play video games, things you do for fun. So I decided to dig out a basement for that. And laying out the rooms here was a little bit more tricky since I couldn't look at the furniture from a top-down view, but it worked well enough. At this point I now had an east wing and a west wing, and they were connected by a long open section in the middle. And with the basic structure done, I moved on to the details. And of course I started with the pond because that was the centerpiece of my build. And in my Pinterest references I had these arches in between the columns, and I really loved that look, so I started building lots and lots of columns. Since the villa was on an island and could not be reached by road, I didn't plan for the usual front entrance. Instead, there would be a helipad on the roof and you'd enter the villa from the first floor at the back. The entrance area would then be a grand staircase leading down to the open pond area. That gave me the chance to try out the new pool tool from the update and add a little water feature at the bottom of the stairs. Pretty cool, right? And then came my favorite part, and that was designing the rooms and obsessing for hours over little details that nobody really cares about except for me. I started with the staircase that I had already set up, and I decorated it with a warm green wallpaper. Later on I added a curated collection of pictures, and I know AI art is very controversial right now, but I was very happy I didn't have to search the internet for hours, but instead I was able to create exactly what I needed in just a few seconds. And I chose dark wooden floors to go with it, which I kept throughout most of the house. But the absolute highlight I had planned for this room was the massive chandelier. Obviously that doesn't exist in the House Flipper catalog, so I had to make one myself. I used a big lampshade and some fairy lights, And since you can resize the fairy lights, I let them cascade all the way down across 3 floors, super dramatic. From the hallway you step into the formal living room on the ground floor. It's basically a spacious room where you can hang out. It has 3 massive couches, a coffee table, a fireplace and glass doors that open up to the backyard. The dining area is in the same open space, but I wanted to separate these two, so I used the bar as a transition zone. The space is meant for slightly more formal gatherings, so I went with glossy wood surfaces to give it a more refined look. Of course, any good resort needs a spa area, so I added a space with an indoor pool, a sauna and a steam shower. Then I added a little wine cellar, well, more of a wine room than an actual cellar, and it had some cabinetry in the center, and I don't know why, but my favorite wine racks are those ones with the tilted rectangles. You know, these ones. And since Hausfaber doesn't have those, I had to build them myself with the transformation tool. And it takes forever because I have to rotate every single plank one by one. And while I built it, I absolutely hated myself for that decision, but once it was done, I felt like the effort was totally worth it. Moving on to the first floor where I built the bedrooms. One thing I wanted to do was to create a spacious and huge master suite. The kind of room that's just there for the sake of luxury and not because anyone would ever realistically use all of the space. The other bedrooms were more like high-end hotel rooms. I wanted each of these rooms to feel unique, but at the same time still connected to a common theme. To achieve that, I gave every room a patterned accent wall. And yes, I'm a millennial, so of course my first instinct is to go for an accent wall. And by doing so, I ended up with color-themed rooms, even though that wasn't my intention when I started. One problem that I always have is that the current selection of beds is very limited in the game, and nothing really fit with what I had come up with so far. So I went with the most neutral bed and then custom-made the headboards. The entertainment area in the basement was meant to be way less formal than the living room that I had built. First I added some sofas for a home theater, a pool table, a bar, and yeah, another bar. I like bars, okay? I custom built it too, so the bar ends up looking kind of half round. I think it just feels more realistic than lining up everything rigidly against the wall. For last but not least, I saved the outdoor area, and for a good reason. In my previous projects, I ran into performance issues and lags when things got too detailed, and well, I only have a mid-tier PC for casual gaming, so most of the problems come from rendering bushes and trees, which is exactly why I left them until the end. I added a few small pavilions to enjoy the sea, some stone paths, some wooden paths, plants here and there, but once I added the plants around the pond, that's when things started to become challenging. Building the dock was at times really frustrating and a real test of patience, let me tell you. But it was absolutely worth it and I made it. Okay, let's turn up the graphic settings, roll the music, and here's the finished project. Did you like my video? Consider to give it a thumbs up or subscribe if you want.